Hello, everyone, and welcome back to learning about the United States Constitution and how it came about. If you recall, the Articles of Confederation was the first real government we had, and it was just too weak to get anything done. Well, a group of delegates from two different states met at Mount Vernon to answer some arguments that the two states had. They hoped that Washington would help smooth over this disagreement between the two states. Then other delegates came from other states to work out more problems, and they realized, we really need a better way to work out our problems than our current government is allowing us to have. So they called for all the states to meet again later at Annapolis, Maryland. Only 5 showed up. It wasn't a great meeting, but it did accomplish one thing, and that is everyone agreed to visit Philadelphia, and every state would come to Philadelphia the next year to figure something out to make our government better. There we go. They decided to fix the Articles of Confederation. The states, 12 states, sent 55 delegates there. They made George Washington the chairman, hoping that he would be able to smooth over any arguments. They also decided to keep everything secret so that people could do what they thought they needed to do without worrying about outside influence. And so we come to the Constitutional Convention at Philadelphia. Very soon they realized it's going to be almost impossible to fix the Articles of Confederation because they required unanimous votes. Every state would have to vote yes to change any little thing, and that would just be too hard. When's the last time every state agreed on anything, right? So we're just going to start all over from scratch and make a new constitution and a new government. They all agreed that their central government was too weak and it needed to be stronger. Remember, during the war, we were angry at a very strong government that was too powerful and was hurting us. So then we swung the pendulum way over to the other side and had a government that was so weak, it really couldn't help us. So now we have to find somewhere in the middle where it's strong enough to do its job, but not so strong that it could take away your rights and your freedom. Something somewhere in the middle. Anytime that several states have a problem, the central government would be able to fix that problem. State governments should only deal with their own state. Should Maine write laws about Florida? Should Virginia write laws about California? No. Every state should be dealing with its own problems and let the central government in DC deal with the national problems. All right. They also said we need a divided government. So under the Articles of Confederation, there was one central government, and they said that's not ideal. There are different jobs to do in government, so they decided to split the government into 3 with the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. And we'll talk more about that later. But no person or group of people should have too much power. Since we are giving the government a lot more power than before, we don't want any one person or group of people to have all that new power. And everyone wanted a republic. That is when the people do not vote on every law, the people vote on representatives, and the representatives vote on every law. For instance, President Biden's trying to spend money on the infrastructure, roads, bridges, railroads, ports, even things like electricity and internet. And Congress gets a vote on that. Do your parents get to vote on it? No, but your parents did have the opportunity to vote for congressmen who would go to DC, and those congressmen are voting on the law. There were quite a few different arguments about how the government should look like, and one of the first big questions was how much control in DC should each state get? How many votes, how many congressmen in Congress should each state get? And the small states like New Jersey said every state should have an equal vote. Every state has an equal say in government. Well, the big state said, no, that's not fair. If I have 10 times as many people, shouldn't I get 10 times as many votes? So they said all the votes should be based on population. The states with more people get more votes. Here's an example of that. Notice New Jersey wants each state to have just one vote equally. Virginia says, well, if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if we have 6 people, that's 3 times as many people as you have. So shouldn't we get 3 times the votes as you? Does anyone know? Raise your hand and tell me. Does anyone know how we decided to fix this problem? Did we go with one state, one vote, or bigger states get more votes? That's right. We decided to do both. We split Congress in half. And one side of Congress is voting based on population and the other based on just state by state. So the Senate has equal votes. Every state gets 2 votes. And how many states are in the Union today? That's right, 50. So how many senators are there? That's right, 50 times 2 is 100. Maine gets 2 senators. California gets 2 senators. Rhode Island gets 2 senators. Texas gets 2 senators. Everyone gets 2 senators. But then on the other side, the House of Representatives is based on population. Now, Maine's a little weird in that we have 2 representatives, just the same as we have 2 senators, because we're a rather small state. Vermont's even smaller. Vermont only gets 1 representative in the House of Representatives. California gets like 52 or 53, I think. That's a lot. So in the House of Representatives, the bigger states obviously get a lot more say than the smaller states. But in the Senate, it is absolutely equal. And both sides have to vote yes on any law before it becomes a law. The next compromise is about commerce or trade. We need laws about what to do on the open ocean. So every state gets to decide how to control its people in the state, but who owns the ocean? No one does. So we need rules of the ocean. And when there's a problem, if someone steals your ship, piracy on the open ocean, who takes care of that? It can't be a state. It has to be the country as a whole. North and South are split on tariffs. Now, a tariff is a tax on imported goods. Anything that comes into the nation, we tax it. The North wanted a high tariff so that people would buy things made in America instead of things made in China or England or whatever. For instance, if there was an American furniture company that sold chairs for $10 each, and there was a British furniture company that sold chairs for $10 each, we would then tax the British company $5 per chair. So when you go to the store, the American one is $10 and the British one is $15, with 5 of those dollars going straight to the government. And that's a tariff that makes more people buy American. All of our factories are in the North, so the North wants high tariffs to protect its business and make people buy American. The South, on the other hand, the South sold a lot of cotton overseas and then bought a lot of stuff from overseas, so they were very dependent on trade, and the South wanted a very low tariff to allow more trade. Well, the Commerce Compromise gave things to both the North and the South. It gave more power to the North by saying all laws can be voted on by a 51% majority, not 2/3. If you have over half, you get your will done. And there are more people in the North, so that will give the North an edge in government. And the compromise favored the South by saying that states cannot tax each other's exports. That's what you sell. So if South Carolina or Virginia is selling a ton of cotton overseas, we cannot tax that to try to keep it going out and keep prices low so that the cotton farmers get all their money and get a lot of customers. The 3/5 compromise is really, really sad. Slaves are not citizens. So should we count them in the census? See, the census does 2 things. Number 1, it determines how much taxes your state pays. And number 2, it determines how many representatives you get to send to Washington, D.C. to go to the House of Representatives. So how should we count the slaves? The North says, count them towards taxes. Tax the slaves as much as you tax free people. That way, if you own 10 slaves, you are paying 11 people's tax money. You're paying tax for yourself and for all the 10 slaves that you own. Obviously, you get all the money that they make by working for you, so you should pay the taxes. And then the North also said, do not count them towards representation because they are not citizens. So tax them. Do not allow the South to have extra votes in government. The South gets extra taxes that have to pay, but not extra representation. The South said the exact opposite. Do not tax the slaves, but do count them for representation. Count them towards how many congressmen you get. There were some counties where 3/4 of the population were black, and they were almost all enslaved. So that would give the South a lot more votes in government because of all the slaves that they own. And as we see, but just by the name of the compromise, they decided to tax slaves at 3/5 of the going rate. So for every 5 slaves you own, you only pay 3 people's taxes. And then also count them 3/5 towards congressmen. So for every 5 slaves you have, just add 3 to the number of population. So tax them some and represent them some. I don't think it's a great compromise. But there you go. It also forbade making any laws interfering with slavery for 20 years because the South says the minute the North gets an advantage, they're going to undo slavery. And, you know, there were plenty of abolitionists in the North who did want to get rid of slavery, and the South was afraid of that. So for 20 years, they're not allowed to make a law about slavery to keep slavery for the slave owners for 20 years. Now, some people don't like this law because they say this compromise makes slaves only worth 3/5 of a human being. And it's actually worse than that. This compromise is agreeing with the South that slaves are not counted as human beings, really. They are property. They are seen more like tools or farm animals, according to the law, rather than actual human beings. And just like you would tax property taxes, if you own a big farm, you have to pay for that. If you own a lot of slaves, you have to pay taxes on that as well. It's not saying that slaves are worth 3/5 of a white person. It's saying they're property. They're not people at all. Disgusting. And I'm very glad that we got rid of that 7 years later. The North hoped that slavery would be gone in the South in 20 years' time. They hoped that slave owners would just free all their slaves just because they're nice. Did that happen? No, it did not. Some principles in the Constitution. Number 1, written law. The king is not in charge anymore. The king's word is not law. Law must be written down, and no human being is more important than the law. Everyone has to obey the law. Does the president have to obey the law? Yes. And if the president breaks the law, should the president go to jail? Yes. If a congressman breaks the law, should they go to jail? Yes. No one is above the law. King George was acting like he didn't have to obey the law. A lot of the problems that England did to America were actually already illegal. They said, I don't care if it's illegal, we'll treat them badly anyway. So written law is the highest authority in America. The Constitution is more important than the president's wishes. You don't get to undo the Constitution just because you don't like it. Presidents, Congress, the Supreme Court, they're not allowed to do whatever they want. They have to obey the law. The law is more powerful than any person or any group of people. Next principle is separation of powers. They did not want one person or group of people to have too much authority, so they split up the jobs. Here we have the 3 branches of government. Legislative, that is run by Congress. Legislate means to write laws. All laws made by DC are passed by Congress. Executive, that means to enact, to enable, to enforce. That is run by the president and his team. For instance, if the legislative branch votes on this infrastructure bill, they say we're going to spend this many trillions of dollars on roads, bridges, railroads. Well, then it's the president's job to take the money that Congress gave towards that project and hire all the construction workers and write all the details about which bridge gets fixed first and all that. So legislative votes to build the roads. The president hires people to build the roads. Make sense? If they write a law saying you're not allowed to steal from rob from a bank, well, then it's the president's job to make sure that there's policemen who catch you if you rob from a bank. Then lastly, the judicial branch, that's headed up by the Supreme Court. They're in charge of applying the law to any specific case and interpreting the law. What does this law mean in this case? So if cops capture a criminal, the cops do not get to punish them. No, the police bring them to the judge. The judge hears both sides of the issue, looks at all the evidence, and the judge and the jury get to decide what to do in this case. Each one of these groups can stop or slow down the other. For instance, the legislative gets to write laws, but the president can veto them if he wants. The president can do a lot of things, but the Supreme Court can say that's unconstitutional and strike it down. Each one of these groups can undo the other's work. Here we go. This is called checks and balances, where each group has power over the other two groups, which means for anything to get done, all three groups have to agree. If a bad person or a bad group of people gets into power, hopefully the other two groups will be able to stop them. Next idea is federalism. Federalism is breaking down the power between DC and the states, and then the local towns and counties. The central government is separated from the state government and from local government, and they actually have different jobs. Neither one of them has to really obey the other in every situation. They have to work together because they are separate. This is very different from England, where the central government hires the local governments, and the local governments have to do whatever the central government says. Well, here in America, states have some power to say no to DC, and states have some power to make rules and laws that are different from other states and are different from DC, because the president does not hire Governor Mills. The people of Maine get to vote for Governor Mills and our state legislators. The president has nothing to do with that. And we're going to end here for right now. Next time we will finish up, and we'll see why and how our new Constitution has worked so well. All right, have a great day.